The IDP Pro Manager Pod on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by the SGPN merch store. So go use promo code SGPNBA to get 10% off everything in the SGPN store after today's show and save on your favorite podcasters' merchandise today. And so, the IDP Pro Manager Pod is a proud member of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, home of the hottest, smartest, and fastest growing sports gambling and fantasy football providers in professional sports entertainment to date. And now, without any further delay, here are your veteran senior IDP pros, Craig, Brad, and Gary. Sacking today's hottest NFL IDP. Damn it, sorry about that. What do you mean, just one take?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is Friday morning. It is about 1 week until the NFL draft, and we are here with you on the IDP Pro Manager Podcast. We'll be back next week to go over the actual NFL draft, but this is week 2 of our NFL draft IDP preview. Gary, how is Friday treating you the week before the draft?
Beautiful, beautiful. And if this time that intro music played, we're gold, man. Let's get this shit going.
Yeah, we got about another 12 guys we're looking to get through. Most of these guys are probably going to be taken on day 2 of the upcoming NFL draft, which will be Friday night, 1 week from the recording of this. Last week we went over a lot of guys that you'll probably see in round 1, but there might be a couple that sneak in there as well. And also as a reminder, we're not doing most of the defensive tackles and not really going over the cornerbacks at all. Again, for your basic IDP leagues, most of them as rookies are not going to matter. But I think there's a defensive tackle we'll talk about here today that I have some excitement about. But we will start off with the linebacker. We didn't get through a whole lot of linebackers last week. This guy has gotten first-round buzz. That's Trenton Simpson. He spent 3 years at Clemson. He's about 6'2", 235 pounds. He is a guy that came up pretty heralded from high school. He was the number 26 overall prospect in the 2020 high school recruiting class. He will be 22 this NFL season, and he was third-team All-ACC in 2022. Not a whole lot of accolades, and you're looking at what his production was. It wasn't anything crazy. 28 his freshman year as far as tackles, and 65, 72. Some nice tackles for a loss, and sacks in his second year. A little bit of a down year this past year, but athletically, he's one of those new age linebackers for the NFL when you look at him. He has elite speed score. He has great explosion and agility, and he's sort of what you'd think of if you switched it around, where when Isaiah Simmons was coming out, he was a safety more so in college that they switched to linebacker. Trenton Simpson is more of a linebacker in how he was used, but he does have viability in coverage. He did all right there, and he was used sort of all over the field in a similar role, not exactly the same. Gary, how do you feel about this guy? It seems like he's been gaining some steam as of late for his draft capital.
Right. Covering him. The only thing I really had a big concern about was that his tackle rate it's a little bit higher than what you would like to see with the volume. He's got some development, and I feel like he's a little bit undersized. I think he's more towards that safety. So landing spot should matter a lot here. But, anybody like Pittsburgh or even Washington, let's see, there's a few that could utilize them. Do I think that he's going to have starting potential off the top? Purely on it's going to really depend on where he lands at, and it's going to have to be a really cheesecake spot.
Yeah, he's a guy that he can certainly get some playing time as a rookie, getting out there in sub packages, covering tight ends, things like that. Is a guy that does have some use in coverage at the NFL level, but probably not a day one starter unless, of course, something happens where there's an injury ahead of him or just completely explodes at camp with beyond what we saw at the college level.
Right.
Next guy up, we have a safety. It's Antonio Johnson. He's a 3-year safety at Texas A&M. He's pretty similar in size, although he just weighs less, like safeties often do compared to linebackers. 6'2", 198 pounds. He had a nice PFF overall rating at an 81.6, and he was a number 78 overall prospect in the 2020 high school recruiting class. He'll be 22 this season as all. He was second team All SEC in 2021, first team All SEC this past year. Now, you've heard us talk about safeties a lot on this show, where once you get past that top 12 maybe or whatever, safeties really do become a dime a dozen. There's a lot more viability later down in the safety rankings just because of how many teams are utilizing three safeties more. They're out there on the field. It just becomes a glut. Most rookie safeties kind of fall into that. But Gary, anything that you saw that you liked about Antonio Johnson?
Oh, well, if we have anybody that's probably looking for a pure box safety, he's an option. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm having trouble with Branch even landing at the right team this year. There are only so many that haven't made moves, brought in some type of solid veteran. I don't think he's going to be able to upset or unseat a solid guy already on a roster. So if we're looking at somebody like the Rams to do some switching around and maybe put him in a box, I think it could be interesting as a productive by default kind of guy. But as he reads, in today's NFL, safeties, they demand them to be good in coverage 90% of the time. And that's kind of why we have these three safety sets and we have these types of free safeties that are really over the last few years in IDP have come up. The free safety market of production has come up. The passing game and just the development of the nickel package and everything else. So I'm not super excited. I'm going to pay attention. Maybe a long-term prospect, dot him in some deep league, but standard-wise, he's really going to need some luck.
Yeah, to your point, there's a lot of teams that sort of appear to have filled up their starting safety needs, whether it was through free agency or guys that they already had there when someone got let go. Some teams where it's going to be interesting because Cincinnati is one of them. It seems like they have a plan to replace those two starting safeties that left. Could that be a spot where someone else comes in and takes the job if they're taken early? Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, there really aren't that many teams where it's just, like you said, have a glaring hole for someone, even like Tampa Bay, where, they have one spot filled up there with Winfield. The other one, they went and got Ryan Neal relatively recently, who had showed well in Seattle and kind of feels like, all right, they're going to give him a shot to be one. So, yeah, it'll be interesting for the safety class. I think it's a nice deep class for long-term potential, but for this year, it isn't that exciting.
It's a little rough around the edges.
That certainly is.
Morning. Nothing like waking up to crying kids, hungry pets, and an angry alarm clock. All a football fan wants is to get your kids to school, feed the dogs, and clock in at the office, and then you can finally settle in and enjoy a moment of peace with your morning cup of coffee. And you are just in time for the SGPN IDP Pro Manager Podcast,
Nice.
which your idiot league mates haven't yet discovered. Let Brad, Craig, and Gary start your day with all the reliable IDP information you need. Tune in every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the SGPN Fantasy Football YouTube channel, where your SGPN IDP pros know exactly what you need, besides another cup of coffee.
The SGPN Fantasy Football Podcast now offers rewards for every episode listened to and downloaded on Spotify. Tune in every episode to answer a posted Q&A question, earn DGen points. This month, SGPN Fantasy Football is giving away a $50 gift card. Go to Spotify and join in on the fun.
And today we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. The NBA and NHL playoffs are here, and what better way to get down on some player prop parlays than over at Underdog Fantasy. Besides NHL, NBA, and MLB games, they've also already got NFL best ball drafts with a guaranteed $500,000 in prizes. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN. We're going to move back into the linebackers here, Gary. This next guy is a linebacker from Oregon. It's Noah Sewell. And he's a guy that was another sort of high recruit. You've heard a lot of these guys sort of coming out. He was a five-star recruit, number 13 overall in his high school recruiting class. Going to be 21 this year. He was the Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year when he came into the league there in 2020. First team All Pac-12 in 2021 and second team this past year in 2022. He had a really productive 2021 when you look at what he did stat-wise, 114 combined tackles, 8.5 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks. And he was a guy that a lot of people had kind of thought, rewinding to this time last year, that he would be really high up here in the NFL real draft rankings. But he's kind of fallen. It kind of seems like he's going to be, again, a day 2 pick here as opposed to solidifying himself with a down year. When you look at his athletic profiling, it's pretty good. He's got an 8.33 relative athletic score. He's got really nice speed, but explosion, agility, not really ideal. It's not up there near the top for the NFL level these days. And when I watched him, for what it's worth watching tape, it kind of felt like that way too. It kind of felt more like a throwback 2-down guy at the NFL level, which there just aren't as many of these days because of that versatility and need. But what did you think about him?
Another guy, he's just kind of light for the position for me. I mean, he like you said, the expectations were that he would be at a next level this year. He would be higher on the boards this year. And it's not exciting. It's not exciting. He might fit automatically into some kind of rotational role. I think it would be better maybe as an outside linebacker, stand-up kind of rusher and some packages. But long-term, he's got some developing to do, and I'm not sure if he's going to ever have that high-end ceiling.
Yeah, even looking at his PFF scores, it was kind of backwards from what it looked at. When, again, I'm watching him with not a professional scout's eye or anything, but his coverage grade was, like a 72.6, which was one of the best for the linebackers that we're talking about here. And his run defense grade was lower than I thought it would have been. So, again, what you see on the field doesn't always equate to what's supposed to be going on there in the play itself. This next name you're going to be familiar with, BJ Ojulari. He is, of course, the brother of Azeez Ojulari. I believe Azeez 2 years ago went 50th overall in the second round to the Giants. BJ spent 3 years at LSU, 6'3", about 244 pounds. Had a 76.3 overall PFF rating last year. The highest of those, he had an 83 in pass rushing. And there's a lot of people talking out there that they felt he was a better prospect than his brother coming out. We don't have a whole lot of his testing size-wise, though. For an edge rusher, he does seem to be a bit smaller. He did have a nice explosion score there, but in terms of the speed and agility, he did not really get the testing in to complete those. And when you look at what he did on the field, again, he's at LSU there, and he didn't do a ton. You see with a lot of these guys, actually, it kind of feels like 2021 was a better year for them than what 2022 ended being. And he had 12 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks in 21. This past year, 5.5 sacks, 8.5 tackles for a loss, both in that mid-50s range for combined tackles. I wasn't as excited about him as I was his brother. There was a lot of talk about Azeez being a first-round pick until some concerns about injuries and stuff came up. How you feeling about BJ compared to his brother there, Gary? I personally feel he's going to go later in the draft than his brother did.
Likely. Just, almost the same kind of bio. But when you think about it, I don't know. Things are really kind of like changing. Some guys get put on the fast track. So I got to be honest. If somebody would reach for this kid, I think he's got some tangibles that somebody could say, even the Bears. I hate to mention the Bears, or say even Philadelphia. They might be able to utilize them, off the top. Does he have that type of edge rusher or DL ceiling that I'm looking for in a prospect? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that the body style, the type, I don't think he's going to fit into either or be a hybrid. I don't think he's a perfect fit for either.
Yeah, there's some other guys we're going to be talking about here that size-wise certainly feel like more of a traditional defensive end, or have more of that clear, agility speed combo with a lighter size that would fit as an outside linebacker. there does feel like there's a lot of tweeners in this edge class, and even with some of these guys we're not going to get to, and it makes it hard to project. Maybe if he does end up, on the Bears or something, be like, all right, well, he's going to be spending most of his time doing this. This is how we feel about him doing that for IDP, and we'll get a better gauge on it. But without knowing landing spots yet, it is a lot of guesswork for how these guys are going to end up having their careers play out.
Exactly.
This next guy, he's got a really fun name. Felix Anudike-Uzomah. He was a 3-year edge player at Kansas State. A little bit more stout there size-wise, 6'3", 252 pounds. And while he was considered a lower sort of conference for college football, possibly, he did show up and he did produce well while he was there at Kansas State. Didn't play much at all his freshman year, but sophomore year, 50 combined tackles, 14 and a half tackles for a loss, 11 sacks. And this past year, 11 tackles for a loss, 8.5 sacks, 46 tackles. So about the same. And he's a guy that, for his size, he tested well too here, with an overall 8.7 score. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He's only going to be 21 years old, and he was the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year and first team all Big 12 in 21 and 22. And he was a guy that really jumped off the page to me. He does feel more like a traditional defensive end out of the two positions, just with the size and what he was able to do there at Kansas State. But I saw a lot of power and explosion from him when he was on the line there, which is something nice to see. People talk about sometimes there's a level up in competition from like the Big 12 going into the NFL or something. But I definitely feel like this is a guy that could have a spot in a rotation from day one at the NFL.
Do you? I like that.
How much of one, I don't know, but someone being out there as a situational pass rusher, I mean, it's not great for us.
Right. You caught me off guard leading in with that one like that, man. That's interesting. It's hard for me to bite into. I do understand why. It does seem to all line up that it could all be possible. He's going to probably have to develop a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's thrown into the fire, anything is possible with these guys. I don't have an argument about it other than I'm going to ask people to remember that rookies are, should be used as luxury picks. And we are looking at these serious guys seriously as defensive tackle plays. And I guess that's what you're coming at, right, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how they end up deciding to use them, if they use them inside, that'd be a defensive tackle type of league. And again, how many of these guys are going to have value right away in a redraft league? Out of all the IDP rookies, your standard league, 5, 6, maybe, if you're looking over the course of a year. So
I can see it. If profiling him a little bit, if he's taking it somewhere where he's in a 3-4 interior defensive lineman rusher, interior defensive, somewhere like Pittsburgh. Let's see, they might be utilized like that in Arizona, something like along those measures. It's got some appeal as long as he lands that starting gig or soon.
Fact. The National Breast Cancer Foundation reports that a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer every 2 minutes. And we already know finding new innovations in research, surgical options, and clinical trials is essential to finding a cure. And to all those fantasy football ladies that may be listening, we also know with early detection your survival rate goes up. And that's why breast self-exams are very important, and the best way to give your old girls their best fighting chance to win the championship. So, with all that being said, the fellas here at the IDP Pro Players Pod would like to remind everyone, the National Breast Cancer Foundation does take donations, so please, go and give what you can. And let's give our mothers, our wives, our sisters, and every woman, the support, the resources, and maybe even more importantly, the hope, by knowing we all really do care.
And we're also brought to you by the SGPN merch store. In honor of the NBA playoffs, from now until the end of April, which is coming up soon here, get 10% off anything in the SGPN merch store when you use the promo code SGPNBA. So head over to the store, sportsgamblingpodcast.com, and use promo code SGPNBA to get 10% off everything. And when you're over there looking at that, one of the fun little shirts, of course, having a bunch of girls. I got my son, and then 4 girls. There's a cute little shirt for your kid. Do you want to build a parlay over there? Which, of course, is from Frozen. So all sorts of fun stuff, even for your little ones, you can check out.
Cool. Sweet.
Going on here, we got a couple more edge guys. Of course, this is an edge-heavy class in terms of future IDP potential usage. Isaiah Foskey is another one. He was a defensive lineman for 3 years at Notre Dame. Certainly got a bigger frame on him, 6'4", 257 pounds. And he was a guy coming out of into college from high school. He's a 4-star recruit in 2019 class, so he's a bit older. Turned 23 this season. He was a consensus All-American in 2022. Got a nice athletic score overall at the 9.61. And production-wise, he was a guy that didn't show a ton either. There's outside of Will Anderson. I mean, let's be honest, there's not a ton of these guys that just blew everyone else away. There's nice production for a year and a half, and he was another one that actually improved from his 21 to 22. Going from 10 sacks to 10 and a half, and then 9.5 tackles for a loss to 13 and a half. He's got the big body frame. Teams are going to like to see that. He's probably not going to be a first-round pick this year as well, so probably not having immediate IDP impact for most leagues there, Gary. But did you see anything out of him, long-term potential that you like?
Out of Felix? Sorry. You cut.
This is Isaiah Foskey.
I've lost a lot of something you've said those past little bit. It was like
we're talking about Foskey from Notre Dame there.
Okay. Yeah, no, actually, I had a little bit of problem with the reception there for some reason. We actually had storms rolling in. They weren't like immediate, I didn't think. So, Foskey, the edge rusher, right?
Yeah, from Notre Dame. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Just another. We keep saying this. I'd like to stop for a moment and talk about this class as an overall general, wouldn't you? Because do you think that even he has a real opportunity? I mean, there aren't a lot of open jobs. For starters, there are a few sweet spots. There's a few teams that might have a luxury pick, and some of these kids might slide a little bit to some opportunity, I guess you could say. But as a class, it definitely, you was talking about the hybrids. The only thing I see is I keep getting deeper and deeper in this class is the fact that it's not deep. It's not a defensive prime class whatsoever. Everybody below people that we tried to cover last week, for the most part, are developmental plans or long shots. I'm not a huge fan of his production, and I don't think personally that it will matter where he lands. I have very little interest with him at this moment. I do like our hybrids. I like Anderson and, of course, Smith. I think those hybrids and your top, your Ness and your top defensive ends, I think those are guys that are worth talking about. And I know the rest of everybody else would like to, we're going to continue the list or whatever with our time. But, really consider at this point when you're in standard leagues, man, I tried to talk about it a little bit last week. We had some programming problems or technical problems. So I want to make sure that everybody understands I would much, much, much rather take some long shot, wide receiver 2, sleeper rookie, or trade these picks personally, but or wide receiver 3 or some dynasty wide receiver, running back, offensive guy over any of these fellas, especially in standard league. Okay. Use your draft stock. Use your draft stock wisely. It's not being used the best in standard leagues if you're using it on these types of level players. Let them break out. You pay for what you get when it comes to IDP, and if they're worth it, then pay for it later. For right now, concentrate on that offense. Get that, in a rookie draft. Get those top few guys that we've talked about, or you talk about after the draft that landed the right spot. But for the most part, if I'm looking to do anything, I'm probably going to throw some darts at some rookies. And if they don't work out over the offseason and I need some IDP, I'm going to use them to pick them up off the waiver wire. That's all I'm going to do in the standard league, because there's going to be plenty of them. Craig will tell you every year, the first month, guys are popping in and out. Guys pop up. We had a lot of breakouts last year. They're increasing even more, especially in the defensive back department. So some of these guys are good, solid. I like the defensive tackle that you suggested earlier, because that is a prime spot. It is a very scarce position. And if you hit on it, that's great. That's great. But someone like this kid out of Notre Dame, I think I'd rather go for a wide receiver 3 or some tight end that I think has a lot of upside.
Ever notice these days how things have changed with sports entertainment? Suddenly everyone is edgy and they don't mind offending people with offensive words. It's everywhere. Podcasts, radio, to primetime TV. All I want are NFL defensive player reports, maybe a quick update on the best streaming corners, and yet I have to hear about the dirty O. That's right, offensive player discussions and hot takes, blocking my path to the sweet, sweet defensive information I need.
Bullshit.
That was until I found the IDP Pro Players Podcast. And now, unless the IDP Pros John or Gary mess up, I know I'm not going to be offended by their no dirty O approach.
Damn.
So take my word for it. Catch the Sports Gambling IDP Pro Player Podcast every week and leave the dirty O behind. So if you or someone you know has an IDP degenerate problem, that's terrific. And the fantasy move to make is to go follow a couple of the best veterans in the fantasy football industry. That was on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Oh, yeah.
Next guy we have up here, and the one after that even, certainly would be a defensive tackle. But this next guy might have some potential to be, and there's a defensive tackle too. He's certainly got more size and some production here. It's Tuipulotu, edge rusher from USC. He spent 3 years there. 6'4", 290, so certainly a bigger guy out of the list we've talked about here in a clear defensive end. He's going to be 21 this season. He's in the 2020 high school recruiting class. He was first team all Pac-12 in 21 and 22. He was also in 2022 the Polynesian Football Player of the Year, Pat Tillman Defensive Player of the Year, Morris Trophy winner, and unanimous All-American. And when you look at his production, Gary, you were talking about, some of these guys not having great production. Mm-hmm. He certainly did this past year at USC. He had 13.5 sacks, 22 tackles for a loss, 46 overall tackles. He's a guy that did play some inside as far as on that defensive line. Certainly played a lot at defensive end. He's got nice power. He's got nice explosion. He's a guy that I think does have a long-term potential in the league here. And if you talk about someone that versatility across the defensive line front, he could sneak into someone's rotation as far as getting more of that starter type snaps towards the end of the year here, just based on what he did in college and how his athletic profile projects to. So it kind of sounds like that's sort of more what you're leaning to in those type of leagues, are those guys that have a clear shot at direct value for us this season.
Yeah, you can actually go catch a short on our at SGPN Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out this contest we got going on. Anyhow, you know what I kind of profile? I'm like, Tyrus Bowser. He kind of gives me the feel of a guy that's going to be able to get pressure, be a good, solid contributor, but maybe more of a role player and not one that's going to be, giving us a double-digit sacks each season.
Yeah,
I could see him more as that cross outside linebacker, maybe a DL2 play, LB2 play, depending on your type of scoring. I mean, you would have to really favor some sacks because I think we have a TJ Watt White without the sacks, probably in a 40-45 range. And that's if he lands in a favorable spot that you had just mentioned. following that up, because he really did stand out, if I remember, at his pro day, or was it the combine?
He didn't test either one of them. It was probably private workouts where you were reading about stuff from him because he wasn't able to do either of those.
Okay. Thanks.
This next guy, it'll be interesting, Gary. I'm really excited to see your thoughts because I'm not a big fan of giving a player comp for everyone. Some people just love and throw comps around constantly. But this next guy is going to have one of the more unfair player comps to try to live up against. That's CoverIsaiah Kancey. Defensive tackle for 3 years at Pittsburgh. Size-wise, in terms of height and weight, he is almost the same as Aaron Donald. And, of course, Aaron Donald came from Pittsburgh and has just blown away defensive tackle leagues. 6'1", 281 pounds for him. He was a 91.8 overall PFF rating with a very nice 92.4 pass rushing rating. And that's what this guy can do. Now, he doesn't have huge hands, doesn't have those crazy long arms, but the guy knows how to get to the quarterback. His tackle numbers were not great, as you can imagine, being what's smaller for a defensive tackle, even in college. Harder to get those tackles. He had 27, 33, and 31 in his 3 years. But from a defensive tackle spot, 7 tackles for a loss, 13, and then 14 and a half. And then his first year had 1.5 sacks, and then 7.5. So the comp that people are going to throw out there is not fair to him, just because the same position, same school, same size. But he is a guy that knows how to get pressure. He was fantastic at that. Knows how to get to the quarterback. In defensive tackle specific leagues, I'm loving this guy, and I'm probably going to have him in quite a few of those leagues because I do think he knows how to get to the quarterback. That's what teams are all about. You put him in there in pass rushing downs, he's going to have a chance to get you some stats this year. Standard size leagues, like Gary stresses all the time, probably not a whole lot of value for him. And he's really a guy that's going to have to go to, and I'm hoping teams in the NFL draft are looking at him this way. You know, there's like 1 or 2 positions he can play across the defensive front just because of his size. So he's a guy that I like a lot. He'll probably go in second, maybe even sneak into the first round. Outside of defensive tackle leagues, there'll probably not much year one value for him.
I have him at 6'1".
Yep, 6'1", 281. Same as Donald came out.
That is a freaking bowling ball in the middle. And yeah, he's got rush prowess. The reason we're not hearing about him, they're like Donald, he's not Donald. He's got some fine tuning to be done. Yeah, but with with being aggressive and being able to get into the backfield and shed the blocks, he can actually shoot the gap. I like the gap shooters, so I could see him getting into some rotation and it being put in somewhere as long as the team's fallen in love with him. You know, somebody, hell, staying home in Philly, that he could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're looking to take one there, but if he ended up in Dallas, that's another spot where what else they have there as far as a pass rusher. I mean, just throwing him in there on those pass rushing downs, I'd love it as a Cowboys fan. Good
ad. He would be a good ad.
Next guy up here, another very productive career, actually, at Iowa State. That's Will McDonald IV. He had 5 years at Iowa State. 6'4", 245 pounds. He's snuck into that first round conversation here as well, and even higher up in that first round as of late. Did a nice 79.2 PFF overall rating. When you look at his relative athletic score, he had a 9.66, which is pretty high, and he's just got great speed. Overall elite explosion and agility grades. If you have him as a true defensive end, he's going to be a little bit on the smaller side, but he's probably one of more of those tweeners where you could stand up and pass rush as well as be with his hand in the dirt. In his career, and again, this is mainly over 4 years, although he did play a little bit his true freshman year there at Iowa State. He had 34 sacks, 40 and a half tackles for a loss, and 125 tackles. So 2020 and 2021 were about identical with about 35 tackles, 13 tackles for a loss, and then 11 sacks each year. So certainly in terms of production, a little bit more consistent production, a little bit more higher end than some of these other guys. Again, he might even sneak into the first round here, and if he gets into a good spot, immediate year one production wouldn't be great if he went to a spot. I just mentioned him, but Dallas is another spot, is sort of to take over for DeMarcus Lawrence long term. You have him and Parsons, pass rushing guys. I think that'd be really nice to see. But you hit it on the head, and there's not too much to say about it, Gary, that it's just going to be where he goes and what opportunity is there, because there aren't a ton of those starting spots. Although, if you know how to get to the quarterback, teams will find a way to get you on the field.
Yeah, he's an older prospect. Super powerful. He doesn't have a lot of ass behind the build, but he's got room to grow, and that definitely can happen within a couple of years. I definitely could see him latching on as a special teamer for sure. I think he can get a gig in a rotation deep. This first year, maybe we'll see a little bit of him, depending where he lands. I think that he's a decent option, and I also like the idea that he could probably make a nice linebacker. We'll see. He's a developmental guy. I think he's kind of caught in between, Yeah. There's a lot of things going on in the college series. It's been happening where they've been getting Jeremy Chin prototypes, Buda Baker prototypes. It's even been longer than Buda Baker, who was the original linebacker / safety. Come on, Craig, help me out. I believe he also played for Arizona. He only lasted for a couple of years, got himself kind of beat up. Anyway, so as we've moved on, though, they've also, pardon me?
I'm thinking of him.
Yeah, either way, it's been going on for a few years, and now we've gotten to the point where yeah, we'll trivia it later or something. But either way, as it goes, those have been increasing, and we have even more and more of them coming out this year. Well, this class, I think it's kind of proven too that over the last few years we've had those Micah Parsons kind of prototypes coming out. We have a couple this year. You have leaner defensive ends, or you have a clear-cut little kind of stout guy defensive end, defensive line interior rusher. It's kind of I think they're really developing into the college. The college level is developing what the NFL is looking for as they've developed their offense and defenses. Created a more exciting game. You've got to cover the pass. That's your number one. You've got to be able to pass rush, and you've got to be able to cover the pass. And we're seeing it just kind of fall the way with the linebackers and the running backs. So in this situation, I think this guy might have got caught in between. If he would have been maybe, he's an older prospect, maybe caught earlier in his, he could have been this kind of prototype. He's still got that capability. Really landing spot, dynasty option, maybe. Deep dynasty stash, deep.
I think, was it Deion Buchanan you were thinking of at Arizona?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. It sounds like him. It sounds like the name, man. There's so many. But yeah, there's like an original
2015 or so, I think. He got moved around like
I think it was right before Neil, I think. Predecessor to Neil. But either way. All right.
Yeah, first round to Arizona in 2014. So I think that's the guy we're referencing.
Okay.
We got a couple more safeties coming up here to discuss. Neither one of them I'm terribly excited about. First one's Christopher Smith II. He had 5 years at Georgia. He's 5'11", 192, so on the smaller side there. 75.8 overall PFF rating this past year. He's going to be 23 this season. He was first team All SEC in 21 and 20. Nope. First team All SEC in 22 and a unanimous All American in 2022. So from the high school recruiting class 2018, a little bit older, like I mentioned, kind of feels more like a free safety to me, even though he does have good scores against the run, just with the size and speed and quickness out there. And again, not a whole lot of excitement overall for those guys right now at the NFL in terms of fantasy production, which of course we're talking about.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I gotta be realistic about this because I'm not one to really, tote any cornerbacks. But the deepest, darkest degenerate at this point, I'm going to suggest a few of those before we go here. It's just the end of the list. It's struggling, and I understand. And people are tuning in. They love to hear the NFL, the college profiling. Well, unfortunately, I can't get over the point that I love these guys and they got potential, but this deep is just serious waste of time to kind of focus on for IDP, be an NFL fan, or think dynasty, period. Dynasty and deep, because you just aren't going to have to worry about these guys unless all of a sudden you hear differently. We'll let you know. We'll keep you on speed dial because there's going to be about 100 of these guys, and more likely they're not going to be. These rookies aren't going to have their names in there. I really don't think so.
Well, even when you look at those NFL draft prognosticators like Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, they have those guys sort of at every site now. But they're talking about, talking to different teams and GMs. They're not dropping specific names of who they're hearing from, but they said, there's a lot of teams that have 15 to 20 first-round grades on players, period, for this year, if you're talking about an average class. Well, there's 31 picks this year in the NFL draft. That's a lot of guys that have second, third-round grades that are going to be going higher than maybe they would in a different year. And that's not to say that they're going to end up being bad players or anything, but it all goes to that, how the team views them. It's about that opportunity to get on the field. And then for us, get us that IDP production. Because if you're not on the field, you're not getting us any points. And if you're one of those people that plays Dynasty and you're a complete rebuild team, maybe you're fine with that. But, standard size leagues, there's no building for next year for a redraft. It's all about this year. And you don't generally, roster space-wise, have the time to sit and wait and hope this guy that's behind Jamal Adams gets hurt again or, something like that. So you kind of got to be playing for the now in your standard redraft leagues. And a lot of these guys, to Gary's point, just won't matter in those.
Yeah. And now we're rolling, man. I'd like to keep that conversation just, rolling. If you got one of these guys, Craig, that you really, really want to talk about, I got a little pop quiz for you here in a second, something that we're going to do tonight on IDP Pro Players Pod. But I want to get Craig's opinion, just real easy kind of stuff. But, oh, damn it. Here we go. Oh, man, call it a progressive moment. What the hell was I going to say before I did that? Because you had a great point there that kind of stemmed off as something. Either way, all right, we'll call it a progressive moment. We'll move on, and I'll probably think of it right in the middle of a conversation or something and have to interrupt again. All right, my question for you is what we just talked about with the coverage of this as a class. All right, in thinking about more of who we may have talked about last week with Anderson and Smith and Ness and Branch. I think we hit Branch.
Yep.
If a team, name me two teams that if they actually draft any rookie at any defensive position or at linebacker, excuse me, any in the top 4 rounds, say no, it's good 3. Top 3 rounds, who are you paying attention to? What teams? Like, you know what I'm saying? Not player, but whoever won the lottery and may get that opportunity. It's the best opportunity they can get.
Yeah, put me on the spot here.
Yeah,
the first one that came to mind, Oakland is one of them. Given what they sort of lack there, Houston's another one. I got to just try to go through these different divisions in my head here thinking.
Well, why he's thinking about that, I'm going to explain myself, folks, because this is your first indicator of any rookie draft. As far as I'm concerned, This is what I look for. Okay, I am not concerned about any other team that takes a linebacker in this draft except for boom, boom, boom.
Buffalo would be one. I'd be excited if Buffalo took one early on with what they lost.
Mm-hmm. Even Pittsburgh could be a possibility. Washington,
Pittsburgh, yeah,
right. Yep. So that's let me move on. We've mentioned a couple. How about safety? We talked about safety a little bit ago, and now this one's going to probably be pretty narrow for instant gratification.
I mean, if I don't see it, but if Cincinnati took one really early, I'd have interest in keeping an eye on him just because it's unproven with the guys that they have back there.
It would probably, for me, it would have to be Branch and probably in the top 2 rounds for me to even pay attention as a starter first off the top, the first year. Because we've already seen what they did with Daxton Hill. They put him on the shelf, right?
Yeah.
So they are capable of that. But great point. I'm sorry. Go on. Anybody else?
I don't know that there's another one that I can think of where immediately
Rams, maybe. I don't think they've filled their need yet, but not necessarily. Tampa Bay could be.
Rams, maybe. Yeah. Tampa, I feel with Winfield there, they'll just try to fill in whoever else they've had. Like Neil.
Yeah, or they'll bring Logan Ryan back or Ryan Logan. Yeah,
I guess the Giants maybe to fill Julian Love, because there's a guy, I think it was in the 5th round, and maybe last year they took Dane Belt, and maybe it was the 4th round. But if they draft a safety high to compete with him to potentially start next to McKinney, that's one spot that I could see that's up for grabs.
Right. It totally just to derail, the whole topic of what we was on. I love Bobby McCain. I love that signing up there. I think he's a good veteran. Is it dynasty signing? No, but I like his opportunity this year in redraft, signing and taking over that Jordan Love spot. It's kind of an undercover signing to me because, he hasn't produced that much in Washington in the past. Definitely just somebody to keep an eye on. But if he hits that, we know that free safety position is golden for production. So make sure that you get your trigger finger happy. Let's see. So safety wise, I knocked that out. Let's see. Now, I guarantee you, folks, next week you're not going to want to miss this because we're going to have our buddy Trip from our old days of Getting Defensive. He's going to be joining us for both episodes, draft weekend on that Friday, and he's going to be bringing that analyst way of doing things that he does things. Gotta love it because he's going to break that shit down to the T for you. But can't wait to have that next week. So we'll be covering a lot more of the first day coverage, what happened in the draft and such. And then later at night, we're going to have them on our pod, which is just on the pod with John on the Players Pod. But you'll be able to get that over the weekend, hopefully right away. Let's move on to edge rusher. Where are you thinking edge rusher? Who would have an instant... And I'm not talking Will Anderson. Okay. I'm not. Right. Okay. Let's take that off because this is a good edge rusher class. Okay. So let's take out those top 3-4 guys. So you think of somebody you're thinking that maybe you're tier 2 rookie level as an edge rusher, possibly. But if he got the opportunity and landed perfectly, any interest? What teams?
Houston's another one just because they need more there. I mean, Houston can use like everything. Seattle's another spot. Arizona's a spot. Philadelphia's a spot.
Chicago's
a spot. Yeah. Even Detroit, if they invested high in one to put across, from Hutchinson, I'd be excited about that, certainly.
There's actually quite a few teams like the Rams that have maybe a main so-called pass rusher, but they need somebody across from them. So those will also open up some opportunities. But usually, unless they come in and can beat out the veteran that's playing across from them, which I don't think that I think Hoyt is going to be out there pass rushing this year since they transformed him from interior defensive lineman into an outside edge rusher towards the last year. He's probably going to be out there across from him. I don't think maybe they got Hollins or Terrell, so there might be some opportunity there. Who knows? Tampa Bay, I mean, nobody's actually like overwhelmed and taken the position. Carolina, there's actually a few spots that could be interesting. That's
Jets
just
are another one if they added someone like high end.
Yeah, unfortunately, what the hell's up with the Jets? You look at them and they get these pass rusher. I do like Jermaine Johnson, the second-year guy coming in this year, but some of these teams, and it's like Atlanta too, it's like they're just jinxed. They can't get the production that as IDP managers we want from them. They might be performing okay for their teams and getting the pressure and doing their jobs, and on film they love what they're doing for them. But what is it about the Jets and like Atlanta? We can't come up with any edge rushers of any validity at all.
Well, the Jets tried to fix it when they signed Carl Lawson. I think he tore his Achilles.
Tried.
Yeah.
Tried.
Well,
I was
yeah,
like,
I
no, what the hell are they doing? All that freaking money to an unproven guy coming out of Cincinnati that Cincinnati didn't want, drafted over, and turned around and paid another dude that wasn't even their draft pick all kinds of money to be on the team right after Carl Lawson was gone. Come on, folks. Yeah, but it was a different Jets organ or front office, if I remember, back at that time when that decision made. But it's still, both of those teams definitely need edge rushers. So if you do see somebody, go ahead.
The Saints, it seems like, when have they had someone consistent across from Cam Jordan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love Carl Ganderson, but Peyton Turner hasn't. He was a higher draft pick.
He was a first-round pick in 21, yeah.
Yeah, and he's not panned out. He went the same way as Davenport went, which is Davenport's in Minnesota. Don't be excited about that. Be excited if they draft a rookie to play across or play in some. I think he's in Minnesota, isn't it?
Davenport's in Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, not excited about that at all, folks. We still got Smith, still got Hunter. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Let's see. Name me. Okay, your best defensive tackle is probably what's his name? Hall?
Jalen Carter, as far as
Carter.
I
was thinking about Logan Hall. That's who I was thinking about, Logan Hall. I was thinking Logan Hall last year because we was talking about Logan Hall like, he was one of those him and Davis last year, So if Carter was to land at the perfect spot for any kind of defensive tackle, DL or IDL, any of them, is there anywhere that you think that if that one team hit him, he would be a ringer or two if you have him?
I think, again, it's sort of like I said with the edge rusher, but I'd like to say Detroit, just because you have just amazing passers. But
how the hell Yeah, go ahead.
But the only thing is at least Dan Campbell so far has really rotated his defensive tackles a lot, which just limits your upside a bit too.
Right. What was that old Ledbetter? No, it wasn't Ledbetter. There was a rookie up there last year. I ran for IDP props, or not a rookie, excuse me, an IDP veteran, interior defensive lineman. He had
Bugs
came on late. Yeah, Bugs. Yeah, I think I rode that IDP props for like 4 weeks straight because they had him down at DraftKings as to get a sack. They at like 0.7 or 3/4 of a sack. That was the DraftKings for like 3 weeks, and I just bet against it each week. He's an huge interior defensive run stopping lineman, so of course he didn't get a sack. I didn't press my luck. I stopped, and I think it was like 2 weeks later he might have slipped up and got one. So, you only run your luck so far, but they could use it up there. They could use it, and they're picking up in that top 10. I understand it went Hutchinson last year. I understand this other, but I don't think you could pass on that opportunity if he was to land in Detroit somehow, or say Philadelphia. You have another. I'm trying to think AFC, but you can't go with Tennessee. You can't go with Houston just because there's not a history of production or somebody next to him to even give him a nudge. I'm not real excited about Derek Brown in Carolina. I mean, there would be a spot.
Changing their defense too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a tough position, and I'm glad, and I hope Craig doesn't mind that I kind of derailed. If you'd like to finish up in the last 5 minutes here, bro, go right ahead. Next week we are going to have a lot to talk about, and in a week or two after that, we will know where these guys are. We'll have a better idea where they fit into these schemes and where they're going. And I got to be 100% honest. I'll eat my shorts, dude, if it's more than one worth of content. I just feel that way. To talk about standard leagues, we will go deeper. I'm talking about standard leagues. Don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, standard leagues, IDP, redraft. There's probably not even a full show's worth of guys to talk about. But I don't know that that's that much different than your average year, just based on how many guys that you feel comfortable talking about with where they're drafted with potential spots.
So basically, you just said
maybe.
Right. You just basically said, "Hey, Gary, F you, man. That's the obvious." Hey,
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it's like
no, but it is, bro.
I don't know that it's any different from your average year.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
we're all good on that, man.
There's a couple years
Hell
ago.
of a show, folks.
Like, what was it? The Tremaine Edmonds draft, was it 2018 then, where they're just piles of linebackers because there were spots and they started right away and they're productive, and like those seasons aren't common. And it seems like people fall because not all, but Gary. Not to the same level. If you're out there on social media, everyone loves rookies because it's fun. Like, it's exciting. It's like Christmas. Like, all right, who's going to go where? What does that mean? Everyone gets excited. But when you get down to, middle of September, how many of these guys are starting for our fantasy teams that you would feel comfortable with? There just aren't many year to year. So
not whatsoever.
But that's going to do it for us this week. And like Gary said, there's not a ton of these guys to talk about. Maybe someone that we didn't talk about will show up and surprise us in round 1 Thursday night, and we'll be here to talk about him next week. As always, we want to thank you guys for watching us live on YouTube. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and like this video on YouTube. You can find where to follow Gary and I on Twitter. You can also find SGPN over on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in with us. We will have Trip with us next week, and we will see you then. Have a great day, everybody.